From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Morning Line with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. Nick Barris here on a Monday. We have a good show this morning. We're going to talk and get into the history and what's happening in a very important part of this city. A city with a very wonderful, colorful history, a portion of the city that I think has a lot of potential for growth in the future. And a lot of that's going to have to do not only with community involvement, but with money and how it's spent and all of that. And what I'm talking about is the Jefferson Street area. Much happened big in terms of when the interstate, I-40, cut through and basically split the area there around Jefferson Street in half. And what it means to this community as this city as a whole continues to grow, and where Jefferson Street's going to go, with potentially millions of dollars on the line to help in development there. I want to get into all of that as we see this whole city growing, and it's an important part of it. But really getting into the history of what Jefferson Street represents for Nashville is kind of how we're going to start the program, and no one better to talk about that than Councilwoman at Large Sharon Hurt. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
It's a pleasure having you here, an area that you're very, very familiar with, obviously. And we're going to talk about a lot this morning, but I thought maybe, especially for some of our viewers who aren't as familiar with the significance of this whole area in and around Jefferson Street, maybe you give us a little bit of a primer, a history of it, and why you think it's so important this portion of the town continue to grow.
Well, actually, you know, we like to refer to it as Uptown Jefferson Street,
Gotcha.
as opposed to, because it's so close to downtown.
Sure.
We have 3 historically black colleges on the corridor of Jefferson Street. Back in the day, it was a thriving community, the district for wonderful music, and of course, you know, the Jubilee Singers, noted for Music City, USA, as well as people like Fats Domino, Jimi Hendrix, and Ironboard Slim, and just a plethora of musicians that made that a music district. You know, we talk about Fairfield for Dr. Bobby Jones. We can go on and on and on of those musicians, and of course our well-renowned aristocratic bands at Tennessee State University.
Sure.
And that was a community that was thriving with economics and commerce back in the 50s, 60s.
It was in the 50s and 60s, right?
All that.
Yeah.
In fact, people that have watched the Green Book, some of our businesses were located in that North Nashville community on Jefferson Street. We're in the Green Book.
Is that right?
People saw that movie, yes.
Oh, I've seen it. Yes, I know what you're talking about.
So the Green Book, Sweats was one of them, as a matter of fact.
That was in there as a place, and just let people know, the Green Book would have been a place that at that time would have been welcoming to African Americans as they travel, knowing that that was an area. Unfortunately, they had to have a book to know where they could go safely,
Absolutely.
right? That was the premise of that movie, which is a wonderful movie.
Absolutely, it was a wonderful movie, and it was so very true. But Jefferson Street was the place to be. I mean, they had Cab Calloway, all of the
not to mention all the food,
all of the great food that was on Jefferson Street, and just the spirit of it and the soul of it is what I love. You know, I'm originally from Memphis, but when I came here to Tennessee State University, I was captured by the soul and the spirit of Jefferson Street. Just walking down the street made you feel good. And even if we took a walk today, I'm sure you could appreciate it. You remember Ed Kendall, a former council member.
Just saw him the other day.
Yes, and he wrote a book, A Walk Down Jefferson Street, because it's important.
Well, if you still go down there, that you can sense the history of it, and I still enjoy that. And I still enjoy going there and eating. But I mean, but something changed.
Yes, it did, the interstate.
Right.
But you know something else that people seem to forget? The interstate came and integration came almost around the same time. So it was a double blow to the community, which really wiped out. So when most of the businesses were gone and most of the residents were gone and people could not go to those businesses that they had once gone to, now it was open for them to be able to go downtown. As opposed to staying uptown. Similarly to what I see with the Jefferson Street Cap. All of this is happening right about the same time of redistricting. So I think it's an intentional push for things to be different for that North Nashville community. And it's very concerning, especially when those people who have worked in that community, lived in the community, served the community, were not included at the beginning of conversations.
Right, and essentially what happens when the interstate goes right through there,
Yes.
it means that folks then can just go jetting through on the interstate instead of traveling and driving through the community.
Exactly,
And which we, by
stopping.
the way, have seen. Interstates have done that to communities
All over
across
the country. Absolutely.
Okay, and it can be devastating.
Much so.
So, okay, that of course was years ago, and
Yes.
there's portions of that area, of course, that are still thriving,
Right.
and mainly because, as you mentioned, the universities play such an important part.
Absolutely.
But now where we sit, and as a councilwoman at large, what is it that you see, the potential for happening there now?
Well, I mean, it all could be several things in terms of what's happening or what could happen. The one thing that I hear from most of the people, and I've attended hundreds of meetings, and people have not said they wanted a cap, but they said they wanted affordable housing. Now, I know the cap money.
Explain that. Explain cap.
Okay, the cap basically is a lid or a deck that will go on top of the existing Jefferson Street, well, the I-40 interstate.
Okay.
And on that, they can put certain things on top of it. In other places, there have been parks and green space. They may put a convention center or even a community center, something that I do think we definitely need, but I'm not sure if that would make it large enough in order to do so for what my vision has with that. But it's interesting because there was a professor at Fisk when they first brought the interstate who recommended that they do this lid and put the deck on top, but the administration did not receive it well. But now we have the administration saying that this is something that we want, and they want the community to engage. But the thing of it is that while it will beautify the community, I'm not sure how it can really truly bring economic development to the community. We will need affordable housing there in order for their, retail follows rooftops. So we do need more people. We need access to capital because that's what's been the biggest challenge for many small and minority businesses. So if they had access to loans and to grants and other capital, we need to support those businesses in a big way, and we want to make sure that we maintain the integrity, the community culture, and compassion.
That's really the tricky part too now in this day and age. We see with gentrification happening, and we see, I mean, let's face it, that area, okay, if there are developers that see it, any place coming out from an uptown, they're going to see this as, well, we can just move in, buy this property up, tear it down, put in gosh knows what. Certainly losing the character of the community. We've seen that happen elsewhere.
Absolutely.
I mean, do you worry about the folks being displaced there if that moves too quickly?
I do, and they've been saying that this particular project will not displace people. But what I'm afraid of is that once this is put there, it's going to increase the value of the community. There are going to be other people who come and buy the $500,000 condos, and those who have sustained that community for all of these years will no longer be able to afford. And when the change of the community, the change of the culture, we won't have the Tennessee State University homecoming parade like we've had for 70 years. And that, it's probably more than I just said 70.
Okay.
But we won't have that parade. And a lot of the politicians use that as their first introduction to the black community for them to get votes.
Sure.
And I think all of that's why I say it's a part of the redistricting. We know that Davidson County is a blue county, and Tennessee is a red state. So we cannot ignore those signs as far as I'm concerned. So I don't see the economic development piece of how this particular project will help. Now, just like the interstate, people fought against it, and they went all the way to the Supreme Court, and they lost. And it happened anyway. And I'm afraid that this may have the same outcome. But if that is to be, I want to make sure on the front end that there are some things that the community can benefit from. Will there be workforce development, a community benefits agreement?
Right.
Will there be good jobs for people? I think we all want the exact same thing, regardless of what the race is. We want to live well. We want to leave generational wealth. We want to build legacies for our children. We want to have options in life. We want to make sure that we are able to contribute to good causes and all of those things, and it takes money to do those things. So if we were able to share the wealth, share that money with all of us, I think that it will be a better Nashville overall.
There is a lot of money we're talking about here, and we're going to get to that in a break in a moment. But first, before he called in and was waiting, let's take a phone call from Eric.
Okay.
And then we'll take a break, and then we'll get into the money as well. But Eric, good morning. Hi, Eric. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. Nick, I just want to say I'm so happy that you have this councilwoman on your show, and I think she brings us some valid points, because I'll give you a prime example.
Sure.
I used to live on Ferguson Avenue, which was up the street from Seville Park, and I'm black. And that was a predominantly black neighborhood. Not only Ferguson Avenue, Cedar Lane, Kirkwood Avenue, Paris Avenue. There was a black barbershop that was within walking distance of my house. You also had a couple of black stores that were in that neighborhood, black churches. What's happened, of course, that was the 12 South area. And, of course, that has changed so dramatically.
Right.
I mean, other than the Edge Hill area with housing, the public housing, pretty much all the black families were gone. And, of course, one of the last black-owned businesses that was there was the funeral home, J.W. Atkins. So pretty much that neighborhood has so dramatically changed. And, again, I'm not against growth like everybody else, but the problem was all those black families pretty much were pushed out of that part of town, neighborhood. They can't afford to live there.
True.
Eric, you're right on point. That's exactly kind of what I was touching on, and he knows that area, and
Right.
he saw that happen.
Exactly. And you know what?
Thank you, Eric. That's a great call.
Yes. Hi, Eric, and thank you so much. You know, I did my thesis. I graduated with a master's degree in nonprofit leadership from Belmont University.
Okay.
And I did my thesis, transformation of a community from chaos to community. And it was Hope Gardens that I focused on. And I did some historical data about 12 South. 12 South was really, truly the first gentrified community. It came in, it happened so quickly. And to not to have civic engagement, not to have a different variety of housing options. Those are some of the things that are specific to those communities that are gentrified. But we had those things in Hope Gardens in North Nashville, where the community was engaged, where there are different housing options, and there are still some African Americans that live there, new and old. We've got 5-generation families that still live in Hope Gardens, but we also have newer African Americans, we have newer white Americans, all kinds of people that are there. And to me, it's a perfect balance of what we'd like to see all over. As you go west of Rosa Parks, you're seeing development occur, and it's not with that same type of
the trick is balance.
Right, the balance.
Balance is the word.
Counts.
Listen, we'll take a break on that note.
Okay.
We'll talk more about, and I appreciate Eric's calls. We can take other calls for those of you, if you live in those areas, what you see have changed, maybe like he just described.
Absolutely.
The number is 737-7587. When we come back, too, we've been talking a lot about money, and there's a good deal of money, federal dollars mainly, that are going to be available for this type of development, and that's where I know you're going to play a large role. We'll take a break and be back with the Councilwoman at Large right after this.